Okay, we are online. So, let's wait a second. We have some few people now. Okay, one moment. Okay, DJ, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Thank you
Okay,
so much.
perfect. So welcome everybody. Today we have two special guests. And the first in line is DJ straight from India. Okay, DJ, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Darius, and good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. And today we are going to talk about in next 45 minutes. We are going to learn everything one should know about JavaScript language. So we'll cover all the essential of JavaScript language, which you can see on your screen. That we would cover what is scoping, hoisting, different characteristics of functions, and if time permits, we would move further and learn about objects, REST parameters, and prototypes. So these are the things we are going to cover, and we would go very step by step. It's live coding. There is no presentation, nothing, and it is like you are in a first day of JavaScript programming class, and I hope you find it useful. So before I move ahead, what I'm going to do, I'm going to just to save the bandwidth of my internet. I will switch off my camera, and then I will start presenting and teaching you. So let me first stop my camera. All right. So
Hello, can you hear
here.
me?
Yeah. Hello, Juan. How are you? We can hear you. Hey.
Hello, I can hear you now. How are you?
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Okay, so we just started. So DJ just started the presentation. He's a first, and then you are second. Nice
Okay.
to see you, by the way.
Nice to see you too.
Have fun.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thanks.
Okay, DJ. Go
Okay.
on.
Hello. So so here you can see my screen, and the environment I'm using to run JavaScript is Node.js. But most of the concept which we will talk, it would be exactly the same. It would be exactly the same. Does not matter where you are running the JavaScript, whether you are running in a browser or whether you are running in on the Node.js platform. So the first thing we would start with understanding how functions and scoping works in JavaScript, and these two are very important concept. And often I have seen people are not very confident about this. So let's start. And we do not have any presentation. Everything we are going to write code and try to understand it. So let's say that you have a function add, and that function takes two parameters, num1 and num2, and then here you say let sum num1 plus num2, and then you return this value sum. Now by looking at this function, if I ask you that what is the purpose of this function, what this function is going to do, most of the time our answer is that this function is going to would return a summation of two numbers, or it be passed to a string, it will return concatenation of two strings. And that is true, but JavaScript function behavior does not depend on how you have created that function. A behavior of JavaScript function depends on how you are calling that function. And this is a very important distinction you need to keep in mind. that what a function is going to return in JavaScript does not depend on how you have created that function. It depends on how you are going to call that function. And since right now we have not written the code that how we are going to call this function, no one in this world can say that what this function would return, because this code is complete. So here your learning is that a JavaScript function return depends on how you are calling that function. So now you can call a JavaScript function, and here if I write the note, you can call a JS function in 4 ways. A JavaScript function can be called in 4 ways. First is called FIP, means, and that is also known as function invocation pattern. So if you call a function like this here, where result and add, and then I'm passing 8 and 9 and console.log result. So when you call this function as you are calling in line number 10, and we're getting the result 17, this is called function invocation pattern. You are calling that function as a function. So when you call a function as a function, then only this function is going to return what you thought, addition of 2 numbers or concatenation of 2 numbers. And only in function and in the function invocation pattern, this return statement had some meaning, has some value. The second way of calling a function is called CIP. CIP stands for constructor invocation pattern. So if I go and call the same function using a new operator, now if you look at the output in the bottom, it does not return 17, and it is returning something else, and that something else is a new object. So if you call a function using constructor invocation pattern, does not matter what that function returns, JavaScript is going to ignore that, and it will always return newly created object. And that is the reason I told you that what a function is going to return depends on how you are calling that function instead of how you are creating that function. So the second way of creating that function is called CIP, constructor invocation pattern. And there are 2 more ways to call a function. One is called MIP, method invocation pattern, and the fourth is called IIP, which is indirect invocation pattern. I would come to MIP and IIP in a bit, but behavior of return statement is exactly the same for FIP, MIP, and IIP. I repeat, behavior of return statement is exactly the same for function invocation pattern, for method invocation pattern, and for indirect invocation pattern. Only for constructor invocation pattern, behavior of return statement changes, and what JavaScript does, it ignores the function which you are, the return statement, and it always returns you newly created object. So, all right. So here we learned these 4 ways of creating the function. Now you may have a question that, hey, if the return statement behavior is same for MIP, IIP, and FIP, then why there are 3 ways of calling a function? There are 3 different ways of calling a function. And we would come to that in a bit. Just note down and keep that in mind. So I hope now you understand that what a function, in how many ways a function can be called, and all. So that was your learning number 1. Now learning number 2 is, as you see that I am calling this function, I'm creating this function in line number 5, and I'm calling that function in line number 12, and it's working perfectly fine. Now what if I move this code on the top? So here what is happening, I'm creating that function in line number 7, and I am calling that function in line number 4. And if I run this, it is working perfectly fine, and I'm getting the expected output. All right, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to change the way I have created that function. Right now you see that I created that function using function keyword and then the function name and the parameters. Now what if I go and change it to something like this? I say var add equal to function. All right, so now you see that it is the same function, and I have just changed the signature a bit, and now I'm calling, and you are getting exactly the same output. However, if I move this code on the top now, and call this function, you see that you are getting error. JavaScript complains about that, and it says that add is not a function. It's a type error. It's not a reference error. Please keep that in mind, that JavaScript knows what is add. Only it is telling you that add is not a function. So it's not a reference error, it's a type error. And these two, as a developer of JavaScript, you really need to understand difference between type error and reference error. Reference error means you are trying to refer something which does not exist. Type error means you are trying to do something on a type which is not allowed on that type. All right. So here JavaScript does not complain about that. Hey, add, I don't know what is add. For example, here I go and put sub and call it. So here you see that it's giving you reference error. Means JavaScript does not know what is sub, because we do not have anything called sub inside our program. However, if I change it to add, you see that JavaScript gives you type error, not the reference error. So this is very important distinction you need to keep in mind. All right, now let us come back to this. When you create a function like this, which is created right now, when you create a function like this is called function expression. All right. And and if you remember, the other way we created a function, and that was like something like this, function add. That is called function declaration or function statement. All right. So here you see that we created the same function in two different ways: function declaration or statement. I prefer to call it as a function statement, and a function expression. Now, when you create a function as a statement, all right, when you create a function as a statement, what JavaScript does, it hoists that function on the top of the execution context. In our scenario right now, the execution context is that demo.js file. So when I create a function add, which is like this function statement, does not matter where I'm creating that function, whether I'm creating that function in line number 14, line number 20, line number 30, does not matter. Always JavaScript will take this function and hoist it on the top of the execution context. Means internally it would be moved on the very top. It does not matter where I'm creating it. And due to that behavior, what is happening, that when you are creating a function as a statement, you are able to use that function before it was created, and JavaScript does not complain about that. So that is the one way of creating the function. Like there are 4 ways of calling a function. There are 4 ways of creating a function as well. The first way is called function statement. And you just saw that the purpose of function statement is that when you this is function statement. When you create a function statement, JavaScript hoists that on the top of the execution context. That does mean that you can use that function before you created that. The second way of creating the function, which we created here, and this is called function expression. So second way of creating a function is function expression. All right. Now, when you create a function as an expression, actually what happens internally, what JavaScript does, it divides this line number 8 into 2 statements. And you can think of that the line number 9 is divided something like this, where add equal to undefined, and then add equal to the function, whatever function you have created here. All right. So this line number, this whole function expression is divided into these 2 statements, where add equal to undefined and add equal to function. And what JavaScript does, it takes this declaration part and put it onto the top of the execution context, and it assigns that function to the add variable wherever you are creating that function. All right. So in between the line where you declare that function, created that function expression, and the top of your execution context, the value of that function, that variable is undefined. And that is why JavaScript gives you type error, it knows that it is a add exists and the value of it is undefined, and you cannot call undefined as a function, so it gives you error. So just to verify that, here we are, and this was our var add equal to function num1. Instead of calling this here, what I'm going to do, let me just show you console.log add. And if you run it, you see that here you are getting undefined. So when you try to do line number 4, you are actually trying to execute undefined as a function, and JavaScript complains about that. And this is a very popular quotation that every JavaScript developer wishes that if undefined was a function, but actually undefined is not a function. All right, so the second way of creating a function is called function expression. The major difference is function expression does not get hoisted on the top of the execution context. Function statement or function declaration gets hoisted on the top of the execution context. Function expression, since it does not get hoisted on the top of the execution context, you cannot access it, you cannot use it before it is created. Function statement gets hoisted on the top of the execution context, means you can use it before it is created. So that was the second way of creating a function. All right, now you understand difference between function statement and function expression. Let me just get rid of this. And here it is working fine. The third way of creating a function is called arrow function, and that became part of JavaScript in ES6. And fourth way of creating a function is using function constructor. So function constructor you should avoid as much as possible, and we are not going to cover that in today's session. Arrow function is very important. One advantage of arrow function is, of course, it gives you a shortcut to write a function. So you can rewrite this function add, which you have written here, as an arrow function var add, and then you pass num1 and num2 in this, and then use this and just say num1 plus num2. All right, and it should work fine, and you are getting the output. So you see that we have reduced these 5 lines of code in just 1 line, and this is called arrow function. I'll come into detail of arrow function in a bit, but my friend, keep in mind that only advantage of arrow function is not the shorthand syntax. Of course, it gives you this readable syntax, but there's one major advantage of arrow function, which we will talk in a bit when we cover a few more topics. But yes, the third way of creating a function is arrow function. Like function expression, arrow function also does not get hoisted on the top of the execution context. It means you cannot use it before it is created. So far what we have learned, that there are 4 ways a function can be called. There are 4 ways a function can be created: function statement, function expression, arrow function, function invocation pattern, constructor invocation pattern, method invocation pattern, and indirect invocation pattern. I'll come into detail of that in a bit. So I hope whoever is attending, you might be learning something, you are learning something new, that whether you were aware that function can be created in 4 ways or not earlier. If you were not, then I hope it added some value to your learning. All right, next what I'm going to do here, I'm going to talk about overloading of function in JavaScript. Now, the concept of what I'm going to talk next does not matter whether you are creating a function as a statement, you are creating a function as an expression, or you are creating an arrow function. The concept what I'm going to talk is going to be the same for all of them. So if you're coming from object-oriented background, there is something called overloaded function. Overloaded function means the function name is same, but it has different types of parameters and different number of parameters, different number of arguments, and that is called overloaded functions. So for example, this add function takes 2 arguments. If you can pass 3 arguments or 1 argument, this function can be called as an overloaded function. Now, by definition and by default, all JavaScript functions are overloaded function. The first thing is that JavaScript is a typeless language, so there's no differentiation on the basis of types. Only differentiation can be done on the basis of a number of arguments. And as you see that function add is expecting 2 arguments, I'm passing 2 arguments, that is fine. But I can go ahead and pass extra arguments here as well. And JavaScript would not complain about that, and I'm getting expected output. In the same way, I can go and pass less parameters, and again JavaScript does not complain about that, and I'm getting some output. So what I mean by that by default JavaScript functions are overloaded. Now let us first see that what if we pass less number of arguments, and then we would look into what if we pass extra parameters and how JavaScript function behaves on that and works on that. So here we are working with different arguments into the JavaScript function. So here you see that when you pass less number of parameters, you are getting nan, because for num1 the value is 8, and for num2 there is no value, means undefined. So in JavaScript, missing value is called undefined. So here if you print value of num2, all right, so when you print value of num2 here, it would give you undefined because you're not passing that value to num2. Now, what you are trying to do in line number 8, what we are actually trying 8 plus undefined. So when you do 8 plus undefined, JavaScript tells you that, hey, I don't know what is answer of this. I don't know what is 8 plus undefined, what value it would be. But what I know that this is not going to be a number. And that's why JavaScript returns you nan, N-A-N, not a number for the operation, what you are trying to do in line number 8. Now this nan is very interesting number, very interesting value. The very first characteristics of nan, which may actually surprise you, that the nan stands for not a number, but its type is number. What does it mean? What I mean by that, if you print console.log and say type of nan, JavaScript will give you answer here number. So this is something very surprising. We are not covering nan in detail today, but I have written a couple of blog posts or videos which I can share with you later, and you can learn about that. So let us go back to the passing arguments in the function. So you see that we can pass less number of arguments. We can pass extra argument as well. So here we are passing extra arguments, and again JavaScript does not complain about it, and you are getting expected output. Now the question is that what JavaScript does with these extra parameters, extra arguments. Can we access these extra parameters inside JavaScript function? Is there any way that we can access it? Is there any way we can use it, or JavaScript completely ignores it? These questions may come to your mind. Now what happens that in JavaScript, every function has, whenever you call a function, besides all these arguments which you are passing to a function, JavaScript pass an extra arguments as well, and that extra argument is called arguments object. So arguments is a keyword here. This arguments is a keyword here. That extra parameter is called, extra argument is called arguments, and this arguments is a keyword here. All right. Now this arguments object is an array-like object. It is an array-like object, but not an array. It is an array-like object, but it is not an array. Keep that in mind. Now here, if you go and print console.log, and if you say arguments dot length, this should give you exact number of arguments you are passing. Here you are passing 5 arguments, 1 2 3 4 5, and it gives you arguments dot length is returns you 5. So actually arguments object contains information about all the argument you are passing to the function, and it is like an array. What does it mean? That instead of this num1 you can use arguments 0, and you should able to get expected output. So here this start with index 0, and you can access. So if you want to access, let us say this 19, you should access it using arguments 4 index, and here you are getting the output. So the message here is that these extra arguments which you are passing can be accessed inside a JavaScript function using arguments object. Now arguments object, this looks like an array, but this is not an array. What does it mean? That if you try to do some array of method on this, like you want to pop and run this, here you see that it gives you an error that arguments.pop is not a function. It gives you a type error. If you try to sort it, again it gives you an error that arguments.sort is not a function. So arguments is not an array. Keep that in mind. Other important thing you should keep in mind about arguments is, I put it num1 and num2. Another important point about argument is, let's say that a JavaScript function can have internal function. There could be nested functions. So if you have a nested function here, all right, and let's say that is called add intern. Now, if I want to access the arguments object of the outer function, this add function inside add intern function, I would not able to access that. So here if I say console.log arguments, this add intern has its own arguments, and this add function has its own argument. And now if you look at here, console.log and arguments.length, all right, and let us go and call this add intern.
I think we lost him.
Yeah, DJ?
I know, I don't hear anything.
On arguments object, and there's no way you can access a parents arguments object inside
Hello, DJ? We lost you.
direct way to access that.
DJ, can you repeat?
Hello, can you hear me?
We lost you 2 times, so.
Is it better now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, now it's okay. Now we can hear you.
Yeah, so I was saying that the arguments object of every function has its own arguments object. So if a child function has to access arguments object of the parent function, there's no straightforward way to access that. Of course, you can assign that arguments object to another object and do all those things, but there's no straightforward way to do that. So there are 2-3 problems with arguments object. The first is that it contains information about all the arguments which you are passing. Even though num1 and num2 are there, it contains information about all the arguments. It does not contain information about only the extra arguments. First. Second, it is not an array. Even if it looks like an array, it is not an array. And third, when you have nested functions, it is very tough to deal with the function arguments object of the parent function and all that. But there is an arguments object. Now, considering these 3 problems with arguments object, in ES6, they introduced something called REST parameters. Now, what REST parameters does, unlikely arguments object, it only denotes extra parameters, extra arguments passed to a function inside an array. So here you see that, let me make it a little bit. Okay. So here what I'm doing. All right, so here you see that, let me get rid of these arguments. You understood about arguments. Now here, we are passing this 8 and 9. Those are going to num1 and num2. So if you look at the context of function add, extra arguments are only these three. And so we should have a mechanism to access only the extra parameters in an array and all. And you can access that using the REST parameters. REST parameters became part of JavaScript in ES6. And you denote REST parameter always as the last formal parameter in the function, starting with 3 dots. Keep in mind there's something called a spread operator also in JavaScript, and that also starts with 3 dot, but that is different and this is different. So it starts with 3 dot REST parameters, and then you can give any name. Here you can give foo, you can give any name of your choice. I'm giving RP, right? So RP means REST parameters. And now if you print the value console.log rp dot length, it should only give you it should only give you the length of the extra parameters, extra arguments being passed, and that is 3. And you see that here you are getting 3 as the output. So REST parameters always gives you extra arguments which are being passed. Now since it has a name, you can access it inside the child function just by the name. Here I'll say rp.length, and you see that I'm able to access inside the child function, and I'm getting the 3 output for that. And the other advantage of REST parameter is it is a pure array, which means you can apply everything you wish to apply. Every array methods like rp.sort. Here I applied rp.sort and running it, and you see that it returns me the array 19 after sorting the extra arguments which are being passed here. So this is REST parameter. The characteristics is that it always denotes extra arguments passed in an array. Second, it should always be the last formal parameters. If you put it into like this, JavaScript throws you error, and it will tell you that a REST parameter must be a last formal parameter. All right, so this is what REST parameters is. And then and how it is different from arguments object, that it is a pure array. Arguments object is not a pure array, and this is very popular, and it should be using that. Again, there's one less unknown parameter characteristics of JavaScript functions are called default parameters. Now here, if I go and say num equal to 92, and if I'm not passing value of num2, you see that this num2 is being assigned to this 99 is being assigned to num2 if I'm not passing that, and I'm getting that output 107. So you can even have a default parameter, default value for a formal parameter, as you see on your screen. So we just learned about 3 things, which is again in context of a function. We learned about in a function, we learned about arguments object, REST parameters, and default parameters. And you need to know that, you need to understand that. All right, so now let us go back and try to understand how scoping works in JavaScript. Okay, and that is very important topic, and every JavaScript developer should know about it. So to explain you scoping, what I'm going to do, I'm creating a function foo here. And let's say that I have a variable called a, and that value is 99. And here we are printing that
Hello. Hey, we lost you. DJ. Hello, DJ.
Yeah,
Hello?
he's no.
Yeah, hello.
Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, but we can't see your presentation.
Oh, I guess you, all right. Let me again share it. So to share this, share screen. Yeah, can you see my screen now?
Yes, yes, we
And
can see it.
where did you lost me? What I was talking that time?
Last 10 seconds or last 15
Yeah.
seconds.
Okay. So I started a topic of scoping, uh, and JavaScript has different types of scoping. First, we are learning global scope. So if you declare something like this, you see that line number 3, var a equal to 99, it means that variable a is in global scope, and that is available inside the execution context of that scoping. Now, when I say global scope, means for this demo.js file, this demo.js file is one execution context, and everything which is declared globally for inside demo.js file is available inside demo.js execution context. And since this function is also part of the same execution context, we are able to access variable a inside function foo and then outside, and we are getting that output. So this is global scoping. Next is called functional scoping or function level scoping. Functional scope. Now, in the functional scope, what let's do here, let us go here and say where b equal to 7. All right, so right now we are declaring this v inside this function foo, means the visibility and lifetime of this variable b is only inside this function foo. If you print it here you get 7. However, if you try to print that b outside the function foo, JavaScript complains about that, and it tells you that it has a reference error. It does not know what is b, because lifetime of this b is only inside this function, inside the function foo. All right, so this is simple. Now let us explore more about the function scoping. Now you see that I'm declaring that variable in line number 8, and I'm using that variable in line number 9. I'm reading that variable in line number 9, and everything is perfectly fine. Now I take this variable, this line, and put it here. Now I'm declaring that variable in line number 8. However, I'm trying to use that variable in line number 7. And you know that variable b is functional scope, means that the visibility of variable b is only inside function foo. Now, when you run this, you see that JavaScript gives you undefined for this. And why? Again, what we learned in function expression, exactly the am I audible?
Sorry.
Am I audible?
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. Yeah. So, so here you see that exactly like a function expression, what is happening that when you create a variable like this, JavaScript actually breaks that into two statements. One is where v equal to undefined, and then b equal to 7. And it will take this statement where you are declaring that onto the top of the execution context. In this case, consider line number 6 is the top of the execution context for function foo. And that's the reason when you try to access it before you declare it, you are getting undefined. All right. So this is something you should keep in mind, that if you try to access a variable before it is declared, functional scoping. Now let us see something interesting here. All right. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to redeclare the variable a inside function. Okay, so you see that I have a variable a in the global scope. I have a variable a in the function scope foo. Now what would happen? And let's try to print this a. Now we have two variables, one for the global scope and one variable a for the function foo. How it works, and this is very important, one should understand that how it works here is so here we have one global scope which is of your demo.js, and inside this you have a variable a that is assigned with value 99. Okay, and then what we have done, we have created one more function inside this, and that function is foo. And this function has its own a, and that is set to 7. So we have now two a variable inside our function. Now, whenever we try to read value of a inside this, either it will be 7 or undefined, depending on the scenario as we discussed. And whenever we try to read a outside this, it will be either 99 or undefined, depending on the scenario. All right, so here, right now, when you run, you get 7 and 99. And then if you move this code from here to here, and most of the developer get confused here, they think that for console.log a, they will get 99 here, which is not true, because it will be undefined, because this a is different a and this a is different a, as we discussed here. And here, since we are trying to access variable a inside function foo before it is declared, and that's why we are getting undefined. Function foo has no information about a which is declared outside, and this is also known as variable shadowing in JavaScript. So this is one thing you should keep in mind when working with scoping. So we just learned about functional scope. The third is called block level scoping. And it became part of again in ES6. What block level scoping does, that the visibility of the variable is only inside that particular block. So here we say if true, and we declared here, and you declare a block level variable using let, and here I say that, hey, let b equal to 80 and console.log b. So you get 80, but if you try to access this b outside that if statement, JavaScript should give you error, and it gives you that reference error, b is not defined, means this b is only accessed inside that block, and this is called block level scoping. And if you change it to var, you are able to access that, because if you declare it using var, then it has become the functional scoping, and that is available throughout the function foo. All right. One interesting thing about block level scoping is that if you try to access it here, you remember that if it is a functional scope, if you try to access before you created it, you get undefined. However, in block level scoping, JavaScript gives you a reference error. It gives you an error, and this area in block level scoping, like the area where you have created it, and before that is called TDZ, temporal dead zone. And that is something which you need to keep in mind while declaring something with let, that if you are declaring something with var, JavaScript will not give error about that, even if that value is not set, and it will be undefined. However, if you declare something with let, JavaScript will give you error about that if you try to access it before you created it. So this is called and so this is block level scoping. And the fourth is called lexical scoping. In lexical scoping, what happens is, I'll quickly go here, and let's say that I have I have a function here, add. All right, and that function takes one parameter num1. And then inside this function, I have another function, add intern, and that takes num2. All right, and here you say that let result equal to num1 plus num2 and return result. Now what happens, what lexical scoping says, that the internal function has access to the function, access to the variable which is part of the outer function, parent function. That is called lexical scoping. Now the main use case of lexical scoping is closure. What is closure? Closure is a concept. JavaScript does not have data encapsulation by default, so it cannot maintain a state. And if you want to maintain a state, there's a concept called closure. Closure is an object in JavaScript which says that when you create a function, like when this function add intern is created, it will remember the environment in which this function was created. Environment means the time of creation of this add intern function, whatever was the value of num1, this add intern will remember that. And that concept is called closure. And to see that in action, let's go here and return that function add intern. So a JavaScript function can return another function, and closure only comes to the action when you return a function from another function. Here I'm returning another function from add. Now to return this function add intern, JavaScript has to create this function, and to create this function, whenever JavaScript creates this function, it will remember the environment it was created. All right, so now if you go and say var result add and pass 7, am I audible, Darius? Everything fine?
Yes, everything's fine.
Okay, so when you call now this res add 7, you see that it is giving you a function, because add function is returning a function. Now, since it is a function, you can call it again and pass like this. I'm passing 2. So add 7 will return add intern. In that I pass 2. So this num2 would be passed, that 2 would be passed to the num2. So you remember that when that add intern is created, the value of num1 is 7, and due to closure that is possible. And here you are getting the output 9. And in the same way, I can go and say res1, and let's say pass 17 and 12, and here you get output 29. So this is the concept of closure, very simply you can think of, and the lexical scoping comes to the action with the closure. So by that, I guess my time is up. My 45 minutes is up. I hope we learned about different ways of creating a function, and then we learned about arguments, rest parameters, default parameters. We learned about scoping, and there's a lot in JavaScript. Nowadays, I see on internet and on Twitter that when some of the people advocate that to work with Angular or to work with React, you don't need to know JavaScript, just jump into the TypeScript and all that. And as a fan of JavaScript, as a lover of JavaScript, that makes me sad when I read those tweets, because your browser does not understand what is .ts file. Your browser has no idea about those abstract classes, about those interfaces, about those generics and all those things. That has to be transpiled to something which your browser understands. So if you really want to be that good front-end developer who understands end-to-end, who can debug without reading the documentation, you need to invest time in learning JavaScript. And JavaScript is something that once you understand it, you would not like any other language. And I'm not saying that you should not learn TypeScript. I'm not saying that you should not learn any other language. All I am saying that this this wisdom that now no longer we need to learn JavaScript is wrong. Eventually, either today or tomorrow or day after tomorrow, if you are in a front-end developer, JavaScript will come back and knock your door, and it has a lot to offer. Some books I suggest is, you do not know JavaScript, great book. It's free on GitHub. You can read that. And it's a very 6 books in 6 volume in this book. So very good book. Other book I support, I recommend is the JavaScript for impatient programmer. That is another book, another very good book. You can learn. And if you I'm sorry for plugging in myself, but if you want, you can also go to my blog. Debugmode.net is my blog, and I have a lot of JavaScript videos shared, and you can find a lot of articles, like around 80 blog posts I have written on JavaScript, which can help you to learning JavaScript. So for example, JavaScript function inside a block scope, how to manually pass, and these things can help you. So this is all about me, about my presentation. My name is Dhananjay Kumar. And here I'll write that. So my name is Dhananjay Kumar, and I am from India. I'm a founder of a conference like how Darissas does NG Poland. I do NG India, and yeah, and I'm a GD and Microsoft MVP. And on Twitter, you can find me on debug_mode. I hope you find my presentation useful. Thank you, Darissas, for opportunity. If there's any question, I'm happy to take it, and over to you.
Okay, DJ, thank you so much for a great presentation. I know that it's very late in your country now. It's 11 p.m.
Yeah, it's 11 p.m.
11 p.m. Yeah. So one more time, thank you so much. I hope to see you on the NG Poland and NG India also next year. So this year NG Poland and next year NG India.
Yeah, and you and Joanne both are welcome to NG India anytime.
Thank you
so much. Okay, next in line is Juan. Juan, we can't see you.
Sorry. There you go.
Okay. Can you start with the guitar, playing the guitar?
Yeah, absolutely. No, not really.
Let's do that.
No, I couldn't.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So the stage is yours, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice. I'll share my screen right here. Let's see if I can do this. It sounds like it should work. And I need to leave the call because apparently Mac needs some permission. So give me 2 seconds. I'll be right back. And this is all right. Can you hear me? Wait a second. I cannot hear you now. Let me just change this right here. Yeah, Darius, can you hear me again? Can you reply again? Damn, now I cannot hear you. Let me give me a sec. I'll try something out here. And, are you sure you're not muted? Okay.
I'm able to hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and I can hear you. And
I was muted. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Darius. All right. All right. That was funny. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Super.
Everything is okay.
Nice. Let's get started then. Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for being here today for this presentation. Thank you, Darius, for inviting me. I think it was a really nice time we had at JS Poland last year, and I'm glad to be here again. So thank you very much for the invitation. Today, I want to talk to you, all of you, about a talk that is perhaps one of those things I've never done before, and it's doing a non-technical talk. So we're not going to take a look into code or how to minimize your bundle or how to make your app faster, but we're actually going to talk about your professional career, your professional journey as a software developer. So let's start with something you might be more familiar with. The concept of the rockstar developer, which is that person, you know, on Twitter who has a lot of followers, who is like, it's the best developer out there. They just write a lot of blog posts. They're super smart. Everybody loves them. They're in the spotlight constantly. This is very common, also known as the code ninja. And some people call themselves that, right? It's very common to see it out there. And I'll tell you something, these people usually, if you look at their Twitters, they have 4 million followers. If you look at their Stack Overflow profile, they have a massive amount of reach. Everybody loves them, loves their answers. They have a lot of medals. If you look at their GitHub contributions, of course, they look just like that. And on top of that, they have free time on the weekend to just pull out some side projects and then publish them on Product Hunt. And this is probably known as go-getters, right? It's people that just put on 80 hours a week of work and they just get things done. And you may have seen people like this out there, like Tim Ferriss or Elon Musk. This is the kind of people. And this is fine. I mean, I think this is completely right. We need people like this. And I'll tell you something, maybe this is your path, or maybe there's another path you want to follow. And by the way, I don't know what it's with the pictures with the finger, but I thought it was funny, so I also did it. Regardless, all I want to tell you today is that that's not the only path for you to consider. So I don't know what I put this in here. I'm twice in the video, that's funny. Anyway, so yeah, that's not the only path. There is a second option. And before I tell you what is the other option, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Juan Herrera. I am from Colombia. I'm a software developer, Google developer expert in Angular. I currently living in Austria. I've been living here for the past year. First time in Europe. It's quite interesting. I like psychology and productivity. I work for a company called Parkside, and we developed software. If you're interested, you can check out the link below. And last but not least, yes, I'm kind of a rock star as well. I like being in public spaces, giving talks, presentations, all over and over again. I just love that. I love being in the spotlight, something that I don't know, I'm like that. But I'm considering just another journey, just another path, a different one. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. And to summarize it, I found a tweet that gives a really good insight into it. Let's look at it. It's by Uberfax, and it goes like this. There's a superhero called Norman Man. In his world, he's the only person without superpowers on a planet full of superheroes. So this might give you an insight, right? If you go into Twitter right now, you will see a lot of people publishing a lot of great stuff, just like people, like very beautiful people publish their pictures on Instagram. They are all supermodels in Twitter. Many of them are superheroes. And maybe another way to put it is by Sam Drashner's tweet the other day, like 2 years ago, where she says, someone was recently telling me they were a code ninja. I don't want to work with a ninja. They leave a bloody mess. I want to work with a code janitor. Comes in the middle of the night, cleans things up. You only know they were there because everything is organized and tidy. So this is a different approach, right? This is perhaps a more silent approach, a more internal approach, as opposed to something external around exposure and fame and popularity. So in order to illustrate this path, I decided to bring a graph. So we have empathy on the y-axis, and then we have internal, external on the x-axis. So first of all, we have the rockstar, right? Which is a person who it's out there in the public eye, and has a lot of empathy in the way that it's a really person that many of us love. It's very well known. There's a lot of great stuff. We really like these people. We're inspired by these people, and that's great. That being a rock star is just amazing. It's hard, but it's just great. But then on the other side, we have the quiet developer, which is what the term I coined for this presentation, which is also has a lot of empathy. They're doing a lot of great things. They have a lot of positive impact, but they're just not as outgoing, and they're just not in the middle of the spotlight always among presentations and so on. They're just doing their work kind of on the background. We also have people who are really out there just giving presentation, writing blog posts and everything, but they're kind of jerks, right? So they don't care about anything. They just care about their brand. They don't really care about who's listening that much. And we don't like these people so much. So they are like infame people, like billions. And then we have the last category, which is people who do not care about anybody and who do not care about perhaps being out there. So nobody really knows them, and they perhaps don't care either. So this might illustrate the path. So you might have seen a lot of, let's start to put this like this. Yeah, well, never mind. You might have seen a lot of, how to put it, a lot of developers who are in the rockstar category, and that's quite fun, and that's all right. But I want to show you what a quiet path might look like. So one of the things you will see is that quiet developers, they don't really get their leverage out of popularity or out of their brand. So they might not have a lot of followers or so on. They're just more peaceful people or more silent people doing the work on the background. To give you an example, they don't care about their followers as much as they care about their own team following them. So they're more interested in having a team who is aligned, who's doing stuff, as opposed to having a large random crowd following them on Twitter. But that's like not so valuable for them. For Rockstar, it is, because it's their brand and it's important to get some traction there. But for a quiet developer, that's just not necessary. They can just still do their work internally. Another example is that if they go to their Stack Overflow profile, they might not have many medals, and even Stack Overflow might be wondering like, hey, what's wrong with you? You're not contributing, which doesn't mean they're not. That's the interesting part. They might actually be contributing. It's just that they just do it in the shadows. They just do it in their company. They just met a junior in the street or in a meetup, and they are helping that person, and nobody knows. And that's fine, because you don't need to expose everything either. If you look at their GitHub profile, it's just like, perhaps like this, right? Where they just made one contribution one day of the year, and it was probably a bug or, well, whatever, doesn't matter. But yeah, that's how it might look for them. But the truth is that some of the impact they're making is actually not measured by these tools we just went through. For example, I decided to go into GitHub and to look for great job as a keyword in all repositories. And I took some screenshots, and this is what I found. People, quiet developers who just went to a repository, created an issue and said, nothing to change, project is amazing, period. Does this get into the media? Does this get a lot of traction and attention and a lot of drama? No, because, this is not its nature. It's just a nature of, hey, I appreciate what you did. Period. I'm done here. I don't have anything to fight for. I'm not gonna request you to delete the logs about asking for jobs, or I don't request more features or you to fix my bugs. They're just quiet, they're more like chill. This is another example. Congratulations on such a good job. A random repository, good work and good design. Great map overall, web design, overly very pleasant to the eye. Thanks for sharing your findings. This is the path of a developer who is not so interested in their own brand, but is more interested in generating an impact that might not necessarily be towards themselves. So quiet developers, they actually have some unique features. One of them is that they speak as if they pay for every word they utter. So therefore, they pick their opinions really well, as opposed to their facts, right? So what happens is that quiet developers don't have an opinion for everything. You've probably seen this on Twitter lately, right? It's common for people to just chime in about every single issue out there, even if they are not necessarily experts. or even if they're experts, some people can just be like, yeah, well, I don't need to share my opinion, and that's fine. So they pick their opinions very carefully. They are not just saying anything they think out of the blue every time. And this other tweet might represent this quote better, when this person, Arif Malik, said, normalize saying, I don't have enough knowledge to give an opinion on that matter. That should be completely fine. You don't need to justify yourself. You need to make things up. You need to brag or pretend that you know. It's fine if you say, yeah, that's interesting. I don't know, clusters, for example. Yeah, I think I read about that 3 years ago. I don't really know much about it. Don't ask me. I don't know. That should be completely fine. Next one. Quiet developers assume good faith by default. And this tweet again kind of presents that better. Let me read it for you. When something in a piece of software makes you say, what were the developers thinking? They were probably thinking of constraints you're not considering. So what happens naturally is that it's common for people to come into legacy projects and say like, what the hell? Why did they create this Angular application without the CLI? The hell were they thinking, right? But yeah, it's probably a quiet developer would just say, yeah, probably they have some constraints. They probably run out of budget, and they did the best they could with the resources they had at hand. Move on, right? So it's not so much fighting or drama around it or a heated discussion. They just move on, right? They just get the work done and move on. Another difference between quiet developers and rockstar developers is, or something that characterizes quiet developers is, this is what you need versus how can be of help. So how can be of help probably won't be so popular in a tweet, right? Like, hey, everybody, does anybody need help with anything? That's like, yeah, nobody's going to retweet that. But if you create a tool that you say, hey, everybody, this is what you all been needing all this time, and I develop it, here it is for you. So that will just kind of put you more in the spotlight. But asking people how you can be of help is actually something necessary and has a really positive impact. So that might as well be for you to consider. I remember when I was in university, another thing I did as a rockstar was that anytime somebody was writing code, I would be the one saying, actually, I can optimize that by just making it shorter, by making it a one-liner. So 3 lines of code, I would just turn into 1 line, and I will brag about it, and I will probably shame other people for not doing it, which sounds like awful, and it was awful. So pretty much what I would do is that I turn the code in the right into the code in the left, and I'll be proud about it, and I'll brag about it, you know, like a rock star. And people will look at me and say like, wow, he's a rock star. So, but this is not true. I mean, how is this even helpful, right? Perhaps in some circumstances, but I think a quiet developer cares more, that doesn't care as much about how their code looks like, but how friendly, how readable, how good quality it might be at the end. So let me tell you something. The reason why you might not know many quiet developers, so they are not as common, is because by nature, they are kind of silent. They are not exposing themselves, so you don't really get to know them that much. They don't go to Twitter and say something like, today I was going to provide my relevant opinion, but I didn't. Hashtag quiet developer, follow me. No, this is not how they do it, right? They just don't tweet at all. And that's how it happens. But we need these people. This is a path a lot of people can take, need to take, or we should take. And this is something me myself, I'm trying. So I'm trying to switch a little bit from being this rockstar developer who knows it all, who loves being in the spotlight, to someone who kind of follows more as opposed to always be leading, because you need to allow some room for the things you probably don't know about. So if you're a developer who is joining our industry, or you're a senior developer who's been in our industry for a while, consider the quiet path as well, something that might not be as encouraged out there in the social media, but it's something perhaps just as meaningful. That's it. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. And yeah, that's it. If you have any questions, just feel free to write in the comments.
Okay. Thank you so much for this great presentation and this great point of view, especially these 4 types of developers. Wow.
Nice.
That's amazing.
Nice. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so do we have any question? No. If you don't, we don't have any question, I think so. One more time, thank you, Juan. Thank you, DJ. Thank you all for today's second JS Online Meetup. And
Thank
see
you.
you in 1 week. We have NG Meetup, and in 2 weeks we have another JS Online Meetup. So one more time, thank you so much. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye bye. Ciao.